welcome to our, I believe this is our 11th Beetcoin dialogue. Great to see everybody, some new faces and some folks who've been on some of them before, so welcome. Before we get going tonight, I just wanted to give people a heads up, kind of looking ahead. So the next Beetcoin dialogue after this, so in 2 weeks, I think that's June 8th, if I have the date right, that's going to be our last one for the summer. So we decided to take a break for the summer. That will be our 12th one. So we've been doing these every 2 weeks for 6 months. It's been a very good experience, and we'll see what we want to do by picking up in the fall. But when we start up again in the fall, the first thing we're going to do is an event called A Call to Farms, probably on September 11th. And I know it's kind of an ominous date, but it just worked out that way for various reasons. You'll hear more about that. So over 750 people have attended one or more of these Beetcoin dialogues. It's been a good way to kind of keep our community going and trying to use Zoom despite all of our Zoom fatigue. So kudos to everybody for kind of making the best of that. And the event that we're contemplating in the fall will be a combination of Zoom and local gatherings, in-person local gatherings. So you'll hear more about that over the coming weeks as we pull that together. I just wanted you to all know that. So tonight, we are joined by Esther Park, and who's an investor with many, many years of experience in impact investing. Well, I don't even know, do you even use the word impact investing anymore?
Not so much.
Okay, good on you. She's a leader in progressive, ethical, socially responsible, regenerative investing, whatever words you want to put on it. So it's great to have her here because she's going to share with us some of the experience at Cienega Capital and No Regrets Initiative, focusing on the space that we all care about. And then one of her portfolio companies, I have to look at this name because the name is so beautiful that it's hard for me to remember it. Kaos Sheep Outfit. So, and I had to ask him how to say it. I thought it was Kaos like Taos, and no, it is Chaos. So Robert Irwin is here. So they're going to share the time tonight. First, Esther is going to share her experience from the investor perspective, and then Robert will share the story of Chaos. So Esther, take it away, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. There's some familiar faces. Good to see you, and some new ones. So nice to meet you folks. I really look forward to spending this time together. I'm going to share my screen really quick. I just have a few slides that I'm going to share with you all. As Woody mentioned, I'm with Cienega Capital and the No Regrets Initiative. Cienega Capital is a fund that I manage for a family office, and the No Regrets Initiative is actually a family of organizations that we say we've created separately for tax purposes. So the IRS made us do it. But there is, we have the Piscinas Ranch, which is a 7,600 acre ranch in the Central Coast of California. And we mostly manage sheep there, though I think most of our sheep are still with Robert. And he'll talk about that later, I think. There's an event center there as well. And then the Globetrotter Foundation is the family foundation where we do our philanthropy. Cienega Capital is the entity that I just mentioned, and we do the farm and food enterprise investing. So all of our direct investing goes through Cienega. And then we have a 501c3, the Piscinas Ranch Learning Center. We do a lot of educational activities for farmers, ranchers, scientists, investors, philanthropists. So we do a lot of educational events through there, and that's all through the Learning Center. But we, despite the sort of like 4 legal entities thing, we really sort of see ourselves as one big family. And so we, the overarching name that we call it is the No Regrets Initiative. And it's called No Regrets for a couple of reasons. One is that regenerative ag has been called the No Regrets Negative Emissions Technology. So basically, regenerative ag as a way to draw carbon down from the atmosphere and store it in the soil. It's a no regret strategy because even if there was no climate change, it's still the right thing to do. There aren't sort of these negative side effects of regenerative ag. So the other reason it's called no regrets is because Sally Calhoun, who's our founder, wants to be able to tell her children that she did everything she could to address the challenges that we find ourselves in today, particularly with regard to agriculture and climate. And so with these 4 entities, what we're really trying to utilize is all the forms of energy and capital that we have at our disposal. So on the ranch, we're trying to demonstrate what the ecological possibilities are, and we leverage those learnings in terms of the educational activities that we do through the Learning Center. And we also utilize some of those learnings through the philanthropy and the investing that we do. So it's all kind of an integrated group of folks that are coming together for a common mission. And so we have a common mission across all of the organizations, which is to regenerate the agricultural soils of North America and the communities that steward them. And I will say that beyond sort of the financial capital and the operations of the ranch, one of the things that we feel like we leverage the most actually is our social capital. So we spend a lot of time connecting and trying to create connections in our communities. And so if some of you are on our mailing list, we do these tangos periodically, where we have events where we try to get people to meet each other across all of our portfolios. And we're not the usual investment fund. So I think it was Woody at a Slow Money event, maybe in Boulder, I want to say, where I was asked a lot of questions about the fund and about things like risk and return and scale and impact. And these are the usual kinds of things that people ask about when they're looking at investing or looking at a fund. So how do you determine your risk return profile? How do these businesses scale? How do you measure your impact? And I really feel like those frames are sort of the traditional frames that we lean into in traditional investing. And they lead us to certain outcomes and to certain actions. And so we've decided to do away with all of those. So we don't talk about our portfolio in any of those terms anymore. We've decided to talk about our portfolio in terms of beauty, complexity, people, and relationships. And so these are the things that define our portfolio. These are the kinds of outcomes that we want to see as a result of our investment strategy. So it's quite unusual. The other thing that I would say is that we really value what I'm now calling original ways of knowing. So ancestral ways of knowing. I think that too often we rely on sort of the current like enlightenment driven sort of intellectualism that drives this country and this culture and this economy. And so we really want to embrace sort of multiple ways of knowing things, whether knowing that they're true, knowing that they've created change, and we can know those things beyond just numbers. So that's something that we really value in the work that we do while we're doing it and in sort of the looking back and assessment of what we're doing. Here is a snapshot of our portfolio, and I realize these numbers are pretty small, but I just want to give you a general sense. On the left, we have the overall no regrets portfolio, which encompasses all of our entities. There's quite a bit of money in cash, so I'm just going to subtract that out. But I would say that, sort of net of that, we've done about 20 million in investing through Cienega. And then we've done another about 20 million of investing through other entities. And the 20 million through other entities, for the most part, are investments through the foundation. So what you might think of as like the corpus of a private foundation, we invest those primarily in intermediaries. So that's kind of our strategy of what to do with some of the cash while we're waiting to grant that out. And you'll note that we do have quite a bit of cash. And so we're really trying to figure out a way to deploy that money quickly and in a time frame that makes sense for us. So one of the things that I didn't mention is that the Globetrotter Foundation and the No Regrets Initiative is a 10-year time horizon. So the Globetrotter Foundation is on a 10-year spend down. We are 5 years into that spend down, so we're halfway through. So our challenge is to be able to make investments with that cash that will mature and liquidate in that 5-year period. So to some extent, we're just leaving some of it in cash because we don't know how quickly we're going to make those grants. On the other hand, there's still quite a bit there that we could be getting out. And so that's a strategy that we're currently a little bit hands tied with regard to our back office capacity. But something that that's work that we still need to do. You'll see that our return on investment on the overall portfolio, it's about 4.3%. And on Cienega itself, it's about 5.4%. So this is just on returned capital. So we're not trying to assess what the return is on investments that are still outstanding, but of capital that's come back to us, that's the rate of return. And so even though we don't focus on return, we do still want to see sort of like where we're tracking. And you'll see that it's not embarrassing, right? It's a pretty decent rate of return. Although it's not sort of what people might, deem market, so to speak. And we have a pretty good mix. A lot of our stuff is in loans. But we also have a healthy equity portfolio as well, private equity. Here are a few examples of folks in our portfolio. So we have some folks that are farms themselves, and I would put Kaos in that category. And then we have some that are, and I tried to put some of these that I think the Slow Money Network is familiar with. So Our Table, I believe Narendra presented one week. They're in our portfolio as well. And Kaos actually has a relationship with Imperial Yarn. So they are able to sell their wool to Imperial Yarn, which spins and dyes and makes blankets. And they also supply to some other companies that are interested in climate beneficial wool. And then we have a couple of intermediaries like Dirt Capital Partners and California Farm Link. And then we also have some CPG, consumer packaged goods companies. So Tonka Bar, which is a native owned buffalo meat company. And then another one that I've highlighted here is Eden Ciders, which is a Vermont apple cider company. They are in the spirits industry, but they are working with local orchardists on regenerative practices and preserving heirloom varieties of apples. So that's just a snapshot. We have 35 companies in our portfolio. So this is just a few of them. And about, I would say nearly 60% of our portfolio is women-led or women co-led. So Robert's here, his wife Jamie's out tending the sheep, it sounds like. And so, but in many cases, particularly with farms, we have husband and wife teams. So that counts in our women co-led count. Just in terms of what we're looking at going forward. So, being here in California, and, I think there are probably some of you who are here in the Mountain West, we're looking at a pretty severe drought situation. And so what's really going to turn the tide for us here, particularly in California, where it is so dry? And one of the things that we are really wanting to focus on moving forward is sheep. Because to manage these landscapes, cattle, we've focused on cattle in the past, and cattle are great. But I think in a dry landscape, actually cattle are much more water intensive. And so we really like sheep because they're a bit more drought hardy than cattle. And so if we're going to be able to manage landscapes with sheep, we're going to need a lot more of them. So I think, Robert, this is a conversation we can have later on down the road, but that's one of the things that we're thinking about is like, we're going to need a lot more sheep. So that's kind of what we're looking at. The other thing that we're looking at is almonds. So here in California, one of our biggest cash crops is almonds. And so we feel like it's a potential leverage point for us here, where if we can turn almonds in terms of how they're grown, we could probably create a lot of leverage in different agricultural sectors here in California. So we're really starting to turn our attention to almonds. What can be done there? Who can we influence? What research can be done? All of those things. And I think in the perfect world, we like to have sheep in the almond orchards. So if we could have both of those at the same time, that would be pretty awesome. So we just approved an investment in a company called Philosopher, and they are attempting to create the first regenerative organic certified almond butter. And it's a sprouted organic almond butter. And they're based here in California. And so they're working with some of the almond orchards that we're talking about and that we're looking at here. So that's just an example of an investment that kind of fits into this sort of looking forward strategy. So that being said, I mean, we're again super interested in sort of sheep and the role that they have to play on the landscape here in the sort of brittle, dry climate that we have. And we have a long-standing partnership with Kaos Sheep Outfit. I don't remember how far we go back, Robert, but I want to say it's been probably 5 years at least. And so we've done some closer to 8. Okay. And so we have a multi-level relationship with them. So as I mentioned, you know, they sell their wool to Imperial Yarn, which is another one of our companies in our portfolio. We also provide financing to them for sheep, for lambs, for stockers, depending on what they need, sometimes an operational line of credit. And most recently, we've decided because of the drought, because there's more forage up north where Robert is, we've decided to conserve our forage on the Piscinus Ranch and send most of our sheep up to Robert, where some of the early rains that we got in the fall created conditions for, you know, pretty good density of animal grazing up there. So we also have that relationship with him on the ranch side. And so I think with that, I'll just turn it over to you, Rob. And I'll stop sharing this.
So I'm supposed to talk?
Yes.
You are.
So I think it was 2016 when we first contacted Esther. We were working with Rebecca from Fibershed, and she kind of told us about Cienega Capital and kind of how it worked. At the time when we first started our company in California, we started in 2010, and we used a lot of other people's animals. So we weren't, the best way to describe our company is we're a contract grazing company that works for vineyards, farmers, ranchers, homeowner associations, public utilities. We started out with 50 ewes in 2010, and I don't know, I've lost count. We got like 2,500 ewes. At one point we had 4,000 ewes, but it was too much to maintain year round with the fire, kind of with the fire situation we have in Lake County where we're at. And so we've kind of gotten it down, and it's also helped us where we can take on, when we have extra feed, we can take on like stuff from Cienega Capital. We've actually got we have about 4,000 ewes and then some lambs from other producers right now. And it kind of got out of control it escalated quickly, as they say. So we started out with a small vineyard in 2010 in Sonoma County, about 60 acres, Medlock Ames, and then that kind of waylaid into Fetzer's. So we started working with Fetzer Bonterra in Mendocino County, and then vineyard managers. We really haven't looked to grow. In all honesty, vineyard managers have moved around, and then we've kind of gone with them. So we ended up at all these places because a vineyard manager left. Fetzer went to the next place. Anyway, then we stayed behind with the new management, and then kind of continually grew out, because when we first started with the sheep in the vineyard situation, it was kind of a new idea at scale. But one of the things we were having issues with is we weren't between my wife and I, we couldn't make I was shearing sheep during the day, and Jaime was taking care of the sheep. And then at night I would help her build fence. And so it was kind of, we were struggling for quite a while, but we had to build up our U base, because that's where a majority of our income is coming from, is from our own personal use. And actually the first year that Esther approved the loan for us, we didn't use it. And it's probably why we're still in business today, because when we went to go buy the sheep, the land market went through the roof. If we would have bought the sheep, we would have sold them at $100 loss, and we would not be in business. So one of the things that Jaime, my wife and I, so I do the vineyard season, and then she does what we call fire grazing, and that kind of helps us manage how many phone calls we have to field between each of us. And it's fire season now, so she gets to be the one out making sure the sheep stay in. But one of the things that, we kind of divide and conquer in that regard, but the vineyard deal was kind of my baby, and then the fire season, the fire grazing thing kind of grew on after that. But one of the things that happened with us is people that had vineyards also had pear trees, and then the droughts and the fires and the floods that kind of pushed us around, and then we ended up making a really good partnership. Our company is really just a large community, so most of the people Esther's working with or has worked with that are in the sheep, we're kind of connected to, we are working with, or because there's no real, for what we're trying to do, there's no book on how to do it. So Esther, without Esther's kind of original investment, and there was a lot of risk because we had zero assets. So she, her willingness and risk tolerance to work with us actually was one thing Jaime and I were talking about. I got to get back to it. I'm really bad at circling back, but forgive me, guys. But anyway, circling back to that's what gave us is the amount of risk that she was willing to take really on us on a brand new concept. I'm not going to tell you how many banks turned us down when I came in with all the paperwork and said, I can do this. Promise, I know it's never been done before, but we can do this. And everybody said no. And Esther said, so all I have to do, I have the sheep is collateral and that's it. And I said, yeah. And she said, that's simple. Like 2 minutes later, there was money. We didn't actually use it. It took us a year, maybe a year and a half before we found a good price on some yearling ewes. We were able to get those, purchased about 800 yearling ewes. And then it really kind of went, as soon as we got the infrastructure size-wise in, like, I would wake up at 5 a.m, my phone would be ringing, it'd be some vineyard manager that couldn't get out into his vineyard because it was either too wet or it was too late, or he'd have an issue and he'd kind of forced into a sheep situation. And then we kept bringing in more and more sheep just for lifestyle stuff. My wife and I kind of quit trying to get bigger in our production system, and we've worked as a community. So it's kind of what Esther's talking about, like our look forward is more of a community building situation where we help each other out, because like currently I'm really going to be long on feed. I've got a lot of feed with the lack of rice being planted with my farmers that I work with in Colusa County due to the drought. And so I've got a lot of extra feed, but when November gets here, October and November, because of the drought and the lack of water, we're going to run short on feed coming into the fall. So our goal is to work with other ranchers, which hasn't really been done in the past. And I think that that's part of what Cienega and Pacinas. And I think that whole situation, like the whole community is working on, is building more of a positive community instead of like the women in ranching my wife went to really kind of changed our relationship stuff that we have with other ranches. So like the women that my wife met at those, we help them supply them lambs after when they're short lambs. So we have relationships now through that, but it's not just that. It's when we're about to have a mental breakdown, we have other people that we can count on or that are going through the same things we are. And it's kind of an emotional, we've had a lot of things. I know Woody was making fun of me about, there's a lot of stories we got to keep, but that part of what Piscinus brings to, and Cienega brings to the table really can't be that community part where you can sit and kind of share openly with and feel, I don't know, I think the word safe, but that safe area, safe space to share like the difficulties of animal agriculture is pretty amazing. So for us, it's not just the fact that we've that they financed us or allowed us access to capital. And when we got burnt out in 2018 and we couldn't pay any money back, she didn't even bat an eye. I can't believe, like, 2020 rolled around in COVID and we were working when land market went from $1.85 down to 90 cents. And she was like, and there wasn't even okay, well, let's work on it. We understand, it was the amount of faith. And I don't know if she has faith or she just has a really strong stomach, but, she was willing to work with us. And so she's really, with all that put together, that's kind of what Cienega has done for us. We've made a couple of really good choices on our part, but the best choice was working, because I had to, my wife did not want to go to women in ranching. And I think that was one of the biggest differences in our company going forward, because it was the community that was built afterwards, and kind of as when it really started you put down your guard and you start the communication part. Because one of the things I agree with Esther is that we're not learning anything new. We're relearning things we forgot. Part of animal agriculture, in my opinion, is that there was a lot of talent and older folks that didn't get passed on. And part of that educational learning and this us younger people that are struggling at this thing we're doing is the trial and error part in communicating what has worked or not worked, or what's working better. But it's made a huge difference all the way around. And this vineyard, everything, every time there's a forest fire, it seems like it's an advertising logo for Chaos Sheep Outfit. Through the BLM, every one of those, municipalities, homeowner associations, every time there was a fire, the pressure for us to grow, because I'm kind of getting stubborn about it now, about growing. I don't really want to own every sheep in the state, but there's this huge amount of pressure for us to go faster and get more sheep. But one of the things I agree with Esther, and this is about looking forward, I think that the breeding sheep and figuring out how to get more really good stock in beginners' hands so that they can have a successful first experience. I'm third generation, so I was able to maneuver through really difficult situations. But we're not going to have that as this thing kind of amps up to go forward. The educational basis that there's some of the other producers down in Southern California, where they're really putting on schools and getting people involved in the herding process. We're going to have really good livestock that fits in, that's water broke or fence broke, that understands herding, understands the climate, those kind of things. And so I think that's kind of where my head's already I was just talking to Martha yesterday or the day before about my kind of plan and going forward, and I don't think I'm going to be in the meat business anymore. I think I'm going to be in the breeding business for And we're actually thinking about AI and with live semen from the ram and spinning it and going to get it all females so we don't have to deal with wethers, and not doing it laparoscopically. We wouldn't need to if we're using it, if we're collecting the semen from a live animal at that moment, and then spinning it, getting it all female. Because I think, you know, I do a lot of my head's always out in left field. So the solar field thing that's going up and down the eastern seaboard right now, that they're going to put solar fields in for energy, the companies that I've been talking to are looking between, like, you know, there might be close to 600,000 acres of solar fields put up on the eastern seaboard. Well, my math is that's like 1.2 to 1.8 million sheep. There's 3 million sheep, or give or take, in the United States right now. And so the curve, like, we were at a farm to table event that UC Davis put on, where they were trying to introduce grazers and farmers that want to do cover crops and manage cover crops with sheep. And I mean, literally, there's not enough sheep in the United States just to do like our county if every farmer converted to cover crop grazing and cover crop management. It's just absurd amount of sheep that you need to have to put 8 ton of organic material in a you know, in a, let's say, a tomato field down in time, so that they can still grow tomatoes, corn, rice. It's just an absurd number of sheep that you have to come up with. And then trying to express that and having anybody listen to you at any kind of rate is getting kind of difficult. But, and then, I mean, it's just that we have a farmer where we put 12,000 sheep on his farm, and we only got through a third of his farm. And he's not a monster farmer. And it's just a really good cover crop he's growing. And then you got to get the timing all right. So we leave the vineyards, we move everything over there, and then we try to go like heck. But so the scaling thing, which I know everybody doesn't want to really do, is going to have to happen if you're going to really make the thing. I don't want to get any bigger, but we've got to figure out how to get more people to work in a community where the old-fashioned sheep herder was kind of knock the other guy in the knee and knock him over and slit his throat and take what he has, to kind of building up as a community and being more open and then flowing through these ideas, which is still difficult because there's still kind of the old guard out there. My wife and I call them coyotes, that are sneaking around in the background that are going to take from you instead of kind of build together. And that's a really hard, change is really hard. So we're still dealing with the getting kneecapped from things we don't see, but it's happening less and less. And I think the potential is it's just unfathomable. Because I do think it's coming. I do think the farmers are calling me in Colusa County, which is predominantly a conventional farming community. There's one that's gone completely organic, and I have 3 farms in transition. So we're getting people that were conventional that are kind of moving over, and they're and I'm kind of scared about it because the sheep numbers, I mean, just to come up with the sheep, I had an argument with a vineyard company that farms 12,000 acres, and they're like, well, it's just no big deal. And I said, well, yeah, but you don't understand the amount of money you're talking about. 12,000 acres, if we added that to our system, that's 2,000, or that's 2 sheep per acre. It's 24,000 sheep. Every 1,000 sheep, I need a man, a 4-wheeler, a camp, all the electric fencing. They were talking about like $1.2 million for us to ramp up just to take on one large corporation vineyard. And that's not including operating costs. That's just to get your butt up to speed to make it work. And so the need for capital for all these people that are going to be getting into what we're doing is going to be massive, because most of the people it's going to attract are going to be nomadic. Go back to what it is. It's sheep herding. It's not. So you're going to go back to a nomadic lifestyle. So you're not going to be picking up, people with lots of capital. People with lots of capital usually are not nomadic and want to be kind of a gypsy lifestyle. And so, our sheep, we don't own any land, and that's one of the positive things I actually think about. It's a negative, but it's one of the positives because not tied down to an asset-based or we have to pay that lease no matter what. We're able to flow out, kind of get out of our box a little bit. If there's a fire, there's a flood, we've kind of seen it all. 75% of our county is burned in the last 6 years, where we're based out of. And there's difficulties, the herder wages. We run an H-2A herder visa, and when you tried this, when we first started our company, my wife and I were really passionate about like getting Americans in, kind of what Britain Cole Bush is doing down south. But we were at such a scale already that we couldn't depend on people that would come in, realize 2 weeks later that they didn't like the job and leave. So we based all of our company on guaranteed labor, and then we kind of have one internship that kind of flows through. And we currently have one of those, and then we can kind of get our labor part controlled, because we don't know what we're doing. I know Esther knows that. So we kind of couldn't try to teach people how to do something, because we now, like, this was our second time in almonds. We quit, but we've been working with an organic almond orchard that's got about 4 different locations, and we're realizing sheep that we've bought out of Montana are really working well in the almond orchard, and the ones we've bought out of Nevada are terrible, and they're barking the trees, and we can't figure out why. And we've moved the sheep, switched locations, and the behavior has continued. So there's a lot of the stuff that, you know, we're trying. A friend of mine, a company that buys lambs from us, he's got a deal that says fail fast, fail often, fail forward. Kind of believe in that system, the way we kind of work through everything. We still fail a lot, but we're trying. And if you guys have any questions, I don't know. Did I do all right, Esther? I word vomit everywhere.
That's great. Thank you. I think we're going to move into Q&A. Yeah, Woody?
Yeah, just have open conversation and Q&A. I actually don't see any actual questions in the chat room. There've been a few comments that I think everyone has been able to see. So Robert, could you, so I just have a few questions just about how you're doing what you're doing. What were the vineyards? So how many vineyards are you contracted with right now? And rough numbers, how many vineyards and roughly how many acres?
At least 40.
Wow.
I don't know how many acres off the top of my hand, but I think we're closing in on 8,000 acres. We had 20,000 beating hearts deep in vineyards this year.
And what were those vineyards doing before they were contracting with you?
Conventional and organic were all using, you know, diesel and equipment.
So
I think the biggest.
I want mowing. They were mowing, basically, is what you're saying.
Mowing or tillage, both.
Yeah,
a mixture of both,
right.
Mowing and tillage.
Okay.
But the biggest thing I take pride in is the conventional vineyards, because they either quit spraying or they spray 20 to 30% less if they use sheep. And I think that's kind of the bigger kick into the sheep thing for the vineyards.
And maybe I'm the only one on who isn't quite tracking with this, but the relationship between what you're doing and the fires, if you could just be more explicit on that, just say exactly what that is.
Okay, that's a really good question. So the fire grazing is what we call fire fuel reduction. And so we do that for homeowner associations, municipalities, county parks, and the BLM. We do, and it's also kind of ties into invasive species stuff. So we so star thistle and a few other things. But what we do is we try to take the fire fuel load down about 80%, 75%. So we, and the ladder fuels, so the sheep, well, depending on where you buy them from and their behavior, but the sheep will eat a majority of the brush from as high as they can reach down to the ground. And that we've saved 1,500 homes twice, and just in one homeowner association. And
Meaning, let me just make sure I get this. Meaning, when there's fire nearby, they're bringing you in to do like emergency mitigation, is what you're saying.
no, we do it. They're contracted from the very beginning of fire season. So like right now, we'll be very specific so it's easier to understand. So it's a Hidden Valley Homeowners Association. We started grazing that in 2015 because they know they have a fuel load around their homeowner association. So we'll graze around it starting about the 15th of May to the 1st of June. Well, the 1st of May to the 15th of May, excuse me. We need to be done with that by the 1st of July. In 2015, after we got done with that grazing in September of 2015, fire came through, burned all the way around it, jumped over the top of it, burned back the back houses where we didn't take the sheep. One of the things the sheep do is manure doesn't burn as fast as mowing. So there's still trimmings behind after mow. So it jumped over and burned about 45 houses down on the backside, but they were able to save a majority of the community. There's about 1,500, a little over 1,500 homes in that community, including the ranchos. And then that happened again in 2020. A fire came from the other direction. And at this point, we were grazing both sides of the homeowner association. They've kind of, the scope what we were doing for them has expanded with the fires. And we were doing some stuff for PG&E just down the road. And you can watch the fire as it comes in. You know, where we don't have sheep, it's just roaring, you know, and you like the sound, it's crazy. Anyway, you'd have to be there, but it's scary. And so when it gets to where the sheep are, it still burns, but it slows down, and you can either put it out with a garden hose, a shovel could put it out. But it's really interesting to kind of, you know, at the Hopland field station at UC Davis Hopland, where they have the field station up there, we grazed for Fetzers, and we grazed around their winery there, and the fire burned up right to where we grazed, and they were able to put it out with just 2 people. Other than that, it burned down, you know, a substantial amount of, you know, I think that was 484,000 acres that fire burned. So you the scope of it.
Hey, Robert, let me jump in because we are getting some questions in the chat room now, and I want to make sure we get to them. So, okay, first question that I see here is from Jim Steffen. Do you own a retail meat or wool brand that is recognized among commodity and retail buyers?
No. Do you want to hear the reason, or do you want me to pass on that?
No, come on, we want some reason. Just because you don't know what you're doing,
reason
is
you
don't want to hear your reasons.
So my uncle owned a lamb company, meat company. He was also a sheep rancher named called CK Lamb. His Wolfgang Puck was his like #1 guy. He was one of the first guys in the 90s to do grass-fed, antibiotic-free. And as the better he got at taking care of the meat business, the sheep quality of the lamb and the life of the animal went down. And so it was, you know, it was inverse. So my uncle's direct advice to me was do one or the other. And so what I have faith that other people are really good at moving meat. And I've thought about the wool thing because I don't have to come up with a like fresh lamb daily. So I've thought about the wool thing. But I also think it goes back to partnerships. I'm really good at raising sheep and developing ideas on how to do sheep in farming or Esther, help me out. What's that? Layering.
Right, stacking.
Stacking, thank you. So we're stacking enterprises on top of each other. So that's what I'm good at. And so if you get me out in something I'm not as good at, the quality, I think the quality of what we're doing business-wise is going to go down. And so I've just focused on the sheep part of it.
All right. We've got 2 questions for Esther from Cindy Enger. She wants you to say a bit more about almonds, specifically referencing their water intensivity. And then also, would you share a bit? I mean, Esther, you're seeing the same comments I am in the chat room, right?
Yep, I see that.
Would you share a bit about your journey that led you to Cienega Capital?
Sure. So on the almonds, so yes, conventional almonds do consume quite a bit of water, and it's become a really big issue here in California, especially as they're tightening up water usage laws. And so just like any other kind of farming, operation, it can be super water intensive, especially if you are degrading the soil and reducing its ability to hold water. But if you keep the soil covered, if you keep living things growing on it, if you've got animals going through there, you can actually really improve the soil structure, which allows the soil to then retain more of the water that it gets. And so through rainfall and irrigation, you're going to use a lot less water. And so just by example, and I know it's not apples to apples, but in vineyards, if you have sheep grazing through there, and if you can have them grazing through there as much of the year as possible, you can actually, our vineyard manager has proven that you can reduce irrigation by 90%. So that being the case, if we can manage these almond orchards regeneratively, we believe that we can, significantly reduce the water burden, or just the water requirement for a lot of these orchards. And then the second question, just about my journey. I often call myself an accidental banker. I didn't intend to go into finance. I majored in social welfare in college. So I really came to it through the lens of community and economic development. I really wanted to see how we could help communities improve themselves through particularly the lens of small business. And so I just I fell into a community development bank, and they were like, hey, we like you. We like what you stand for and what you want to do, but you got to pick up the finance. And being a young person fresh out of grad school, that was something I was willing to do, and they were willing to take that risk on me. So that's how I started to get into finance, and then just edging my way into the food and ag space. So I kind of started out more in the CPG space. Consumer product goods, stuff that you see on the inside of the grocery store perimeter. And then when I started working with Sally, she really encouraged me to start looking at farms and farmers. And so, Robert, when you say that, you don't know if I had faith or just a really strong stomach. I think it's a little bit of both, but after many years of working with you, definitely I have a good dose of faith in what you're doing. So.
All right, let's keep rolling because we're approaching the hour here. Want to say anything about coyotes and dogs?
So we've got 40 guard dogs, and then we got border collies to herd the sheep, but we've got we call them white dogs. They're mixed breed. We don't trap, we don't snare. Every now and again, we'll get a mountain lion. About every 4 years, it'll come in and start, I call express killing, where they get 15 to 30 in an evening. And so those are the animals that we'll work with the state with about removing. But the guard dogs have really helped us with the coyote deal. Our biggest theft issue is two-legged coyotes, people. We've gone through a substantial amount of theft, and including the dogs. So yeah, the dogs get stolen as well. So that part is okay. One of the things I want to get on the questions that was about overgrazing with sheep. Everything is about management. Everything's about management. So one of the things that makes sheep better than cattle is because the sheep has got most of the time there is a herder with the sheep. So everything can be overgrazed. It's just less likely to happen with sheep because there's a herder with them, and you can continually manipulate them and move them. I think cattle people are getting more into having livestock pushers, but in the past it was an overgrazing situation. But I think it's going to be a really bad example, but I think when PETA first came around, there was a necessity for PETA. People had really, really bad animal husbandry. They didn't have quality of life for the animals. And now because of PETA, it's pushed people into thinking logically about, it's an animal, you got to give them its best life. We make a joke, but it's real that animals should only have one bad day. But it kind of goes the same way with grazing, with everything, is it starts out and not everybody knows how they're doing. And then you, because of organizations or thought processes or newer generations, it gets pushed forward. And I think the cattle deal is getting pushed by the sheep, kind of the grazing stuff at this point.
Yeah, I mean, so you basically just described in your own words and in a very practical way what's behind the whole Savory Institute and the holistic management of cattle. It's basically trying to, so smart grazing, if you want to say, rather than overgrazing. So
Yeah.
All right, let's just see what else we got in here. So Martha wanted you to say a little bit more about the wool business. You touched on it a little bit, but do you get wool from all your sheep? Who cleans and buys it? Very specific question.
So Imperial Yarn has bought our wool. We've had a couple other that are beneficial wool companies buy our wool. We work with Fiber Shed like pretty regularly, not like all the time. Last year in 2021, because of the drought and management, our wool had a break in it and we couldn't go to any of the domestic, we couldn't stay domestic because of the processing. So last year I got 20 cents a pound for my wool, and I lost a lot of money because the cost of production is way above that. But we're like, as you go through kind of, we have got our wool harvested for 2022. It hasn't gone anywhere yet. We haven't gotten it in mainly because we were way busier than we ever thought of with the amount of sheep we're running right now. So the wool has stayed here, but we take our wool to Utah Wool Marketing in Salt Lake City, Utah, and have them core and sample it as a third-party person. So that way it's got a fair grade on it for whoever's going to buy it. And then I don't let Will unless until Fiber Shed has a chance at finding a home for it, even at a lesser value. They kind of get their first shot at it. And then after that, if nobody's interested, it goes into what we call a conventional market. 90% of that is China.
Someone along the way asked if you're working outside here. It is Christine Perini said, who's doing this? Is anyone doing this outside of California? Then she specifically asked about Washington. I'm gathering she lives in Washington.
Yeah, there is, and there's getting to be more and more people. So it's kind of funny. I just delivered a set of doubles to a brand new person that's just getting started in Minnesota. That's going to do solar field grazing and regenerative grazing over there with cover crops. I think Esther even financed him to buy the trailer, but I'm not sure. I didn't ask any questions. The check cleared, so we're in good shape. But from Tennessee to Minnesota, Washington, Oregon, all over the state of California. I know a friend of mine grazing solar fields in Utah, talking to a couple of new people in Texas and Ohio and the coal fields, and when they're putting these coal beds to rest, and they're grazing on top of it. So, I mean, it goes back to the growth situation. There's just going to be a pile of growth because of kind of what sheep can provide to the environment. But yeah, there's people out there. Scaling ability right now is a little bit harder because it scares. Scaling a sheep operation is pretty scary if you don't have a permanent, home base. So trust me, I've lived through it. That's the reason why we went back down to 2,000, 2,500 ewes. But we kind of, what's the right way to? There is, but I think there needs to be more. We've got to get the herding schools that Piscinus has been trying to set up. We've got to work all that to, because there needs to be more. There isn't enough sheep or the people to do kind of, everything that's out there to do.
I've been thinking once or twice when you were bouncing around on this issue of scale and other people trying to do it and getting them up the learning curve and all. Now I know this is worse than apples and oranges, right? This is This is sheep and pigs. But I was thinking of Nyman Ranch a little bit, and I was just thinking about, they built a business with lots of small operators around the country. Again, it's apples and oranges from a business standpoint, a little bit, the actual scale of the operations and whatnot. But I'm just curious. So I'm not sure this is a real question or not. I'm just reflecting, just an interesting thing you're sorting through, like what's the appropriate scale for your operation, and then how would your operation be able to replicate or spin off or help other people get started? Or so, you've touched on a lot of it. It's going to be interesting to watch to see how you negotiate that in the years ahead. Obviously, Esther, you're extremely interested in helping figure all that out. So it's great. So someone, you want to make a comment? Go ahead.
Well, to do that, you have to be willing to be very open, and to be honest with you, my uncle is the one that kind of taught me that. My uncle taught the people that kind of took him over and did it cheaper than he could and took him out of business, as he was getting older and wanting to kind of retire anyway. And I do believe that's going to happen to me. I'm not naive enough to believe that. But at the end of the day, you have to have belief that humanity will overcome, and you won't get wiped out by the people you help up. And I think there's going to be such a growth curve. It'll expand so big that I might be spared, but I'm not. I do know eventually I'm going to train the guy that's going to take me out. And there is truth to it, right? Like because I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm just very resilient. I refuse to quit. And there's going to be somebody that's going to be able to learn from all my mistakes and be smarter than I am and not make them, because we've lost a lot of money because of those mistakes. And so it's a very hard decision, because you have to, I have a family now. When my wife and I first started in 2010, it was just us. We were living in a car, free and easy down the road we went. And now we've got kids. It's changed our perspective a little bit. And it's one of the reasons why we've scaled backwards, is to manage that time a little bit more efficiently. So, I do believe that, and it goes back to the community and partnerships, because just inside our own little bug, even prior to running this year, Piscinus use and 2 other producers use, my neighbor, Grant Azevedo, I work with him on a daily. He runs my sheep part of the year. I run his sheep part of the year. We have a really good relationship. My neighbor, Clay Shannon, who has Shannon Ridge Winery and Shannon Ranches, I manage his sheep about 9-10 months out of the year. Now we're lambing them out because we're more efficient at it. But it's taken years to build the trust in the relationship. Like Esther said, at first it was just, she had a big gut, and now she has faith. So, it's those building those relationships and then giving the resiliency and the faith in the other. But I really hope in the end it's humanity that wins, because it's what it's going to take all the way around, not just in sheep or whatever. It's good, all the way around. You got to have faith. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Well, there are 2 people asked similar questions about need, like what do you need to go forward? One of them asked about money. So Esther, again, if you're looking in the chat room, do you know Andrew Eisen by any chance? No. So someone named Andrew Eisen asked, what's the need for capital? I'd like to explore this and the opportunities. So I don't know if you want to make a quick comment on that, or you just want to reserve that. You can be in touch with Andrew. I can.
Sure. So I think that the 2 major things that we've provided to Kaos, one is just basically asset financing, which is the sheep. So Rob will need to go and get some sheep from wherever, Montana or somewhere, and he'll tell me I need to buy this many sheep. And so we'll just facilitate a line of credit for him to be able to buy those sheep. And we know how he's going to cycle them through his system and eventually get paid for those. The other one is just working capital, because you do have sort of this seasonality aspect, right? Where you've got pretty heavy stocking going on, and then you have to sell them later. So during those times, sometimes there's a need for working capital there.
So Andrew, if you want to follow up on this afterwards, I'm at woody@slowmoney.org. I can connect you to Esther or Esther, if you want to put your email address in there. If you don't have to, if you don't want to.
I did. I put my email address in there.
Oh, you already put it in there? Good. Okay. So, and then Dennis Tonsiger just asked, what do you need to advance? He didn't ask specifically about money, but he, I think he's asking the bigger question of like, what's the main thing holding you back from growing right now? Well, yeah, he didn't say growing. He said advance, which is kind of a nice word. You want to say, like, what's the main thing you need right now, Robert? If you were asking, if someone said whatever you need to make your life easier and to enhance your success, what would it be?
We're really, really focused on trying to purchase a home base right now that we can control, so that we can, because we're 100% in a service business. We provide a service for everybody around us. And so we need to come up with like an irrigated area or something that we can produce grass on year round. So when we have because I'm just a juggler, I'm just juggling, all these balls are in the air. And when the balls all get knocked out of my hands and start falling, where do we collapse down to? And that's kind of what, where do we bring all of our camps to get fixed? Where do our four-wheelers, our electric fencing, like we're just constantly, which is beautiful, but it's difficult. So my wife and I have decided for us to stay married and sane, it's a home base. So we're working pretty heavily on that right now.
All right, listen, in the interest of time, because we're at an hour and a few minutes. As we usually do, we stop the recording, kind of officially wrap up, but then we just stay on for a while if you want to, if anybody wants to. And by the way, Robert and Esther, you don't have to stay on anymore if you have a hard stop. But so I'm just going to officially end the recorded part of the program right now. Thank you all very much, and see you again in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And I like the part about humanity winning. What was that again? Humanity has to win. Yeah, that was good. I think what you really meant to say is all species have to win. I think that was understood in the way you were saying it. So anyway, Robert, thank you so much for joining us, and Esther, thanks for all your great work. Thank you both.
Thank you.